Everyone, welcome back to this broadcast on yet another Thursday. We're grateful for God's enduring mercies and thanking Him for His preservation over each and every one of us. To those joining us for the first time, we'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you and to our friends and members of our community. Welcome again. Today, we want to briefly look at the next line of thought in that long episode that Jesus was went through with his disciples and members of his community. He was sharing God's mind with them. He was taking the heart of the Father and making it plain, making it clear and understandable to the people of his time. Obviously, his priority was to his students, his disciples, who were in close proximity, and then to everyone else who would hear, anyone else who had interest was welcome to uh, follow the teaching and have an opportunity of mind transformation, or if you like, you can say heart transformation. Right. In this case, well, maybe I should say previously we've been looking at a few things that Jesus had been teaching. He had taught them about various things. The fact that he wasn't about to cancel all of the teachings that they've had over time. He was actually there to reinforce them, to make them or to help them understand what the meanings of those uh, past laws and the prophetic sayings of old, what they actually meant and their relevance to people's life, and that he himself was the fulfillment of all that the law and the prophet had said. He had spoken to them about being salt and light uh, at the same time. And it's interesting that, yeah, he expected that they were to be salt and light at the same time and present in the environment as both at the same time. We spoke about that on the previous episode. He went on to discuss the issues of hatred, of hunger. Um, it was not such. It was not so much of anger management. It was actually addressing the root of anger, the root of hatred, and restoring value for one another. So, along that line of thought, we want to look at maybe a couple of things that he spoke about, which revolved around purity of heart in relations to um, uh, um, matter of sexual relations. Okay, so let's look at the mind of God as Jesus made it clear to us. I'll read in that same book of Matthew, chapter 5, the 27th verse is where I'll be focusing on. So he said, "You have heard it said, or you have heard that it was said, you must not commit adultery." I think most Bible students will know where that comes from. That is part of the, or was part of the 10 commandments that God gave to the nation of Israel. So this was national constitution, and God so much valued and actually does still value the sanctity of marital relations, to the point that he said, no, you must not commit adultery. And I think we know what adultery is going off against one's marital vow. Now, to the people of that time, and maybe even in contemporary society, one would think, yes, the very act is what so the society understands to be adultery. And that was because, to the people of his time, things should be in black and white. I mean, it should be physical. It should be. I mean, I've got to see it. You must be able to prove it by the senses, by sight, by sound, by touch, by the sensory, through sensory experiences. However, look at Jesus's take on this. Now, the point is this: the origin of this law is not flesh and blood. That is, God is not human with flesh and bone as we do have. God is spirit. So whatever God meant about this must be beyond just the interaction of flesh, bone, blood. And so Jesus was bringing that understanding back to people by saying that, but I tell you that if a man looks at a woman and wants to sin sexually with her, he has already committed sin with her in his mind. Now, clearly, Jesus is telling us here that the the scene, SCENE, of the action, the theater of the action, the stage of the action, is not it's not a room, it's not a corner somewhere. It's actually what goes on in the mind. And he was saying that whatever happens in the mind is as good as a physical occurrence, because thoughts are spiritual entities. And the word spiritual here, don't forget, this is not a religious platform. It means a non-physical, intangible, but real entity. So thought is non-physical and it meets all of that criteria, and therefore is spiritual. That is not a physical, is incorporeal, it doesn't have a body. Nonetheless, it's real. It has reality, meaning it's already in existence. Now, think about it. If someone does not have flesh and blood and yet exists, it means that everything he says or does or thinks also exist in that same realm of existence that is also non-physical. But all of those things are real entities because they exist in a non-physical world or non-physical platform. That is why when God thinks, whatever he thinks is already a creation. And man, being God's image, has that self-same property that whenever we think something, that thing, that thought is already a creation. It's already an existential creature. It exists already. And that's why Jesus is saying that if the thought is created in the mind, then the deed is effectively created. It has already occurred. And this principle can be applied to anything at all. That's why you would see in the Bible that as a man thinks in his heart, so is the man. Or guide your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life, and various other scriptures relating to the mind or to the heart. So the mind is very crucial to God, and Jesus was emphasizing this. He emphasized it time and time again. In fact, if you look at most of what he spoke about in Matthew chapter 5, 6, 7, they had in fact, from Matthew chapter 3 all the way through all of his teachings, there was a lot of direct or indirect emphasis on the mind, or on what goes on in the mind. Okay, so that is a crucial principle or a crucial law. Most of the time, the things that we eventually do physically are things that we would have thought about in the mind, and whether we thought about it immediately preceding the action or long before the action, thought usually precede action. I like one of a very a very interesting author, someone I really love to listen to, Caroline Leaf, and in some of our teachings, she'll talk about thinking, feeling, choosing. That is, and these are constant activities in the life of a human. We're constantly thinking. That thought, which is an intellectual exercise for the most part, or activity for the most part, usually gets wrapped up with our feelings or our emotions, and ultimately there is the will to do if we get fascinated enough by that thought. Okay, let's move on. So Jesus was saying, listen, if your right eye makes you sin, take it out and throw it away. I'm going to read that whole chain of thought in order to get the right context about it. It is better to lose one part of your body than to have your whole body thrown into hell. If your right hand makes you sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Okay, now he's talking about eye and hand. But he was previously saying the mind is the real issue. Okay, now is he saying go gouge out your eye or mutilate yourself? No, apparently not. He was really saying, listen, remove the source of irritation. If you know your trigger points, avoid them. It's better to lose an experience and maintain one's consecration than to go along with that experience and breaks one's consecration. And this is a constant challenge to all of us. Okay, let me stop there. If you have thoughts, if you want to expand on this further, please do. But again, look at that emphasis on the mind. We have been saying, we have been echoing the scriptures that says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways." Well, I hope you don't mind this constant repetition about this, because it's at the root of all that happens to us from a human experience point of view, in that if our thoughts are not the thoughts of God, then we will misinterpret what he says. We will look at words and color them with our thoughts, which are not the same as his own thoughts. But what if by God's mercy and grace that His thoughts are our thoughts, then when we see any word from God, we would think His thought about that scripture, and we would be correct in our understanding of the heart of God about that scripture. We will be seeing through His mind what He meant. And this is a key principle because it is possible to misunderstand something and go along with that misunderstanding for 10 years, 20 years, 60 years, 80 years, all through a lifetime. And if the understanding was a misconception, well, time doesn't change it unless there is a replacement of the mind or the thought in the mind. And that's what we're talking about. Now, look at Jesus. The things he was addressing here are things that had been with these people of the nation of Israel for centuries. In fact, for thousands of years, since the time of Moses and since the time of the prophet. And he was coming back to say, the fact that you have been doing these things for a long time does not give credence to them, does not establish that they are valid. Length of time is not what validates truth. No, truth is truth. Whether you just understood it or you've understood it for a long time, it doesn't matter. It's not about that length of time. It's about, well, is mind my mind, and is thoughts, the thoughts of God, my thoughts, so that my ways can be His ways. Okay, we move on from there. Now, another quick point I want to make here was another teaching that he was just addressing a whole lot of societal issues. You would think so. I mean, going by all of these things, these are things that everyday people will be experiencing, and he was addressing them. Now, he was talking about marital relations, and in verse 31, he said, it was also said that any man who divorces his wife must give her a written notice of divorce. But I tell you, look at it. The quotations that it was presenting to the people, I'm sure most people are nodding and say, yes, we know about that. Yes, we know about that. Because they could go back into their Torah, into their various texts of scripture, and see that indeed these things are written there. And they can go back and say, well, it was Rabbeinu Moshe that gave us this injunction. Moses was the one who gave us this precept. So, yeah, that's correct. That's absolutely correct. But he was saying, you didn't quite understand Moses. He said, let me tell you what that means. He said, that's why I would say, but I tell you. And he was telling them, not as the next prophet in town or the next Moses in town. No, he was telling them as the source of the law, as the one who was before Moses was. You know, that was one time when they were saying, we know our father, Abraham is our father, and they were challenging him, saying, you that you are not even 50 years old, how could you say Abraham saw your days and was happy? And Jesus said something that they could not, I mean, they went mad once they heard it. Jesus said, let me tell you, before Abraham was, I am. And we know that Abraham obviously was a great a forebear to Moses. So it goes without saying that way before Moses ever showed up, I am. Jesus was saying that he's been there. So, and he said, he's before all things. And well, that's not the subject for today, but we're saying that It precedes all things, and he himself is the source of this law. So he's saying, my mind was what Moses was trying to get, and he put these things in writing, but you something was lost in communication. Let me tell you what this meant. He said, but I tell you that any man who divorces his wife, except for the problem of sexual sin, is causing his wife to be guilty of adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman is guilty of adultery. Now, you would think that it was talking about, if as a married person you now go and commit something, then a struggle, divorce must follow. Well, in this translation, it doesn't quite look apparent unless we just go a little aside and read another translation. And I'm going to go to the King James Version and read that scripture again. Just listen and see. It hath been said, whoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement or divorcement. 32. But I say to you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving or except for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her, that is divorced, committeth adultery. Now my question is, how can a wife commit fornication? I mean, if somebody is already married and adultery is the improper sexual relations that a married person can go into, whereas fornication is an illegal, unauthorized sexual relation of an unmarried person. So how can he say you can only divorce your wife for the sin of fornication? Well, you will probably think timeline comes into it, that he's saying, look, at the time you meet your wife, before you were, at the point of consummating your marriage, if at that point you found that, wait a minute, my bride had been careless, he said, well, that's the only condition under which you can ask for divorce. So, but if you did not do anything after that, and you say, well, it's all right, I accept that, said, well, that's the chance gone. Effectively. Because a married person could not commit fornication. So it must have been that, well, and you're not supposed to, well, according to the law of the time, which the Bible still holds sacrosanct as the template for our lives. They're saying, well, an unmarried person is not meant to experience sexual relations, because that would be fornication. And if that had happened, then that will have physically, biologically, physiologically caused changes in the mind, in the body. So he said, listen, if at the point of now conjugating marriage or having conjugal relations following marriage, you now find that, wait a minute, something had happened here before. He said, well, at that point, and according to ancient practice, and even, you notice, even various other cultures still practice that sound to date. They want to check those things. People that know what I'm talking about. So, and we're saying, if the man does not make any choices, then I say, hey, wait a minute, something happened here. I didn't marry my wife as, I didn't meet my wife as I should meet her. I say, well, if the man did not make any force, said, well, it means you've accepted that, then the fornication episode is been overlooked unless the man makes a case out of it and then says, no, I cannot go. No, it's been a violation. He said, except that a marriage cannot be dissolved. And was saying, if a dissolution of marriage happens for any other reason, well, according to the standards of our world and in the face of human law, it would be seen as though these people are no longer married. So, but in the mind of God, He still sees them as married because, as far as it's concerned, they're still in heaven's record. The marriage is still intact. So, if that husband or the wife now goes to marry somebody else, well, heaven is still saying this is somebody else's husband, somebody else's wife that's going with another person. Now, and this is why, can you see the difference in the mind of God according to Scripture compared to our contemporary interpretation or application of these laws or what we've derived from it? This is why understanding the mind of God is important, because it's very easy to go away from His mind and be thinking, well, I've done the right thing. There was a sexual impropriety, and so we asked for divorce, and so we've done the right thing. No, but you haven't, according to God. That's why it says, and whoever marries a divorced woman is guilty of adultery. Well, whose standard is this? That's the question we ask. Well, this is Jesus saying, but I tell you. So don't look at me as this is not my statement. This is the statement of Jesus. It just so happens that I agree with him. Yeah, so because it says, well, the problem between God and humanity is that my thoughts are no longer your thoughts, so my ways are not your ways. So it depends on what we really desire for our lives. If I want my thoughts to be his thoughts, then I've got to accept them. I've got to understand his thoughts and accept them. But here, look at how wonderful God is. God will say, well, if any man has ear to hear, let him hear. Meaning, I'm not forcing anybody. So someone can say, no, I don't accept that. No. I don't want to hear any of that. And well, that's fine, because he does not force it on anyone. God does not invent crafts or manipulation of people's wills. He leaves us to embrace, accept his words, or to reject them. Accepting his word is actually called belief. It's the same word for faith. Rejecting it is the opposite. Okay, let's see. I'm wondering whether we should take another quick point or we should stop right here. Maybe we should. Let's take just one more. Now look at Jesus talking about making promises. And here, he was actually talking about, the issue is, do you have credibility? Does your word mean anything? Or, we can say simply put, it was dealing with the matter of trust. Okay, so let me read 33 very quickly. It says, you have heard it was said to our people long ago, when you make a vow, see, and people, when they hear the word vow, they think, oh, this is spiritual, this is very important. The very word vow already connotes something that, wait a minute, this has to grip the mind. When you make a vow, you must not break your promise, because a vow is binding. You've taken an oath. In fact, we do it in court, we do it on various platforms. When we sign an affidavit, when we sign a form, we do we sign a declaration, be a declarative statement. So we literally make vows all the time, every time. Okay. So when you make a vow, you must not break your promise. Keep the vows that you make to the Lord. Meaning, if you now make this vow to the Lord, hey, you better keep it, because the eyes of the Lord run to and fro, is everywhere. There's no, you can't get away from it. And that would sound like, wow, this is important. But look at the mind of Jesus. Jesus expressing the mind of God said, but I tell you, when you make a promise, don't try to make it stronger with a vow. You see, when you make a promise, it said, don't look for anything to make yourself sound any more credible than you are. Don't look for any compliment of trust when you don't have it. So don't try to make it stronger with a vow. Don't make a vow, and it began to list a number of things. Don't make a vow using the name of heaven. Why? It said, because heaven is God's throne. Now, let me read and I'll share the principle. It said, don't make a vow using the name of the earth, because the earth belongs to him. Now, this is now talking about property rights. That is, when you make a vow, usually you want to make it stronger by putting down collateral. Just like if you want to take a mortgage, you would say, well, the mortgage is on the house itself, so that if there's a default, well, take the house, because the house is equal to the value of the mortgage. Or if you want to buy a car on loan, then you put down a collateral or something. Or you make that vow as collateral, so that that's what you should lose when that promise is broken. Okay. Now, but the point though is, according to our basic law and usual law, whatever you use as collateral has to be your property, something that belongs to you, so that when you lose it, then the loss is borne by you on your promise. That is, no one else should bear the loss for what you promise, because that means that it has no cost to you. So then let's look at possible collateral. Jesus says, well, when you make a vow, when you try to make something strong and buy credibility or buy trust, Jesus says, don't use the name of heaven. Why? Property law said heaven is not your property, because heaven is God's throne. Said, don't make a vow using the earth. Again, according to property rights, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So he said, because the earth belongs to him. So we can see who owns the earth, and if it's not yours, you cannot use it as collateral. So don't make a vow using the name of Jerusalem, because it also belongs to him. Now, property law, just pure property law here. You cannot use Jerusalem because it already has a owner. Okay, said the great king, that's who it belongs to. Verse 36 says, and don't even say that your own head is proof that you will keep your promise. Well, you think my head is mine. Okay, well, let's see how much of ownership there is there. It says, you cannot make one hair on your head white or black. Oof. If it was yours, I thought you could do anything you want with it and change anything. It says, no, even that, you don't have full ownership on it. So what is the way out? If someone is so bankrupt and yet wants to make a promise, what should the person do? Well, since there's no collateral to present, then you have no need to present any collateral on your promise. You should simply say, look, I need £1. I will get it back to you as soon as I can. And I'm not going to try to make it any stronger, make that promise any stronger. Just please, I'm asking for that favor. I will do it. Jesus is saying, well, when you are so much out of collateral, then, well, says, say only yes if you mean yes, and say only no if you mean no. If you say more than that, it is from the evil one. This cannot be any more exciting. It means then that all the vow that you vowed, I say, God, if you keep me till next year, if you if you give me my certificate, if I pass my exam, I will pay you. I says, well, I have no interest. Maybe this is the freedom you need from those vows, because, well, he said, when God was never interested in vows, you are the one that lack trust amongst yourself, because you would not listen to you must not lie one to another. You will not listen to that, and it's because you already have trust issues. You're not looking for backup, for accessories, for augmentation, for your lack of trust, for your trust issues, for your credibility issues. Jesus said, come out of it. We have no interest in it. Say only yes if you mean yes. Say only no if you mean no. If you say more than that, it is from the evil one. This needs no further explanation, and there I want to rest my case. Well, I hope this again has been useful. Just coming back to the mind of God, as expressed by the one who revealed him. Well, we look forward to being with you same time next week by God's grace, and we ask that God keeps you in perfect peace. Have a lovely evening and see you next time. Bye.